Kenjaku's Heian lore is absolutely insane, to his secret ties to Sukuna and Yuji in the past, to the fact that he directly served a Heian goddess that ruled over Japan during that time, and also that he and Tengen were actually doing experimentations on Sukuna's DNA, and of course his true relationship with the original Yuji, the person that Yuji reincarnated to, who he originally was in the Heian era. Just what is their relationship? There is a lot of crazy Kenjaku theories to talk about in this video, so hey, if you're a Kenjaku fan, you're definitely going to want to stick around all the way until the end of the video. And do your boy a solid and leave a like, it helps out a ton, thank you. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content just like this. A ton of crazy theory videos, spoiler videos on chapters when they come out, analysis videos, power scaling, because less than 10% of people who actually watch my videos are subscribed. So if you love JJK, trust me, you will not regret subscribing. And of course, thank you to the special great members of the channel. Alright, let's get into this Kenjaku video. So this video is actually going to be split into two parts. The first part of this video, I'll be talking about all of his, relationship with Tengen, and of course just those theories like the experiments he did and all that stuff. And in the second part of the video, I'll be going over his relationship with Sukuna and Yuji during the Heian era and some crazy theories based on all that stuff. Alright, so already with the dialogue that we've got in the story, it's pretty clear that the relationship that Kenjaku and Tengen have, it goes pretty deep, right? They actually do have a long-rooted history between each other. And actually, before we discuss what their relationship was, it's pretty important to actually talk about what Tengen's role was during the Heian era and how people actually saw her. And it's pretty funny because the deepest insight that I've got onto what Tengen was actually doing during the Heian era comes from this random character that we see, I think only twice ever in the series during the Hidden Inventory arc. And it is from the Time Vessel Association representative Shigeru Sonoda. And if you don't remember who he is, don't worry, I'm pretty sure most people watching this probably don't actually remember who he was. But to actually quote him real quick, the Time Vessel Association started in the Nara period as Master Tengen spread Japanese Buddhism and preached the foundations of Jujutsu sorcery. However, the worlds of Jujutsu and religion do not see eye to eye. From that depravity, the Time Vessel Association was born. He further goes on to say, the time has come for the taboo mentioned in the doctrine. We have held steadfast into our monotheism, and now that the threat of the impure merger with Master Tengen is upon us. And these guys are such religious lunatics that they even say, if Master Tengen goes berserk and humanity will be destroyed, they're okay with it because it means that if we die, at least we die alongside the star. Now it is pretty interesting to hear the wording specifically with monotheism, which means that there's only one true god, or they only believe in one specific god that basically rules over everything. And these guys who have been around, as you can see, for a very long time, potentially since the Nara period, they believe that Tengen is the true god, and they have been worshipping Tengen for that long, for many years. And I imagine when Tengen was actually at the height of their popularity, and maybe that's one way to put it, and they were going around preaching their beliefs to everyone, it's possible that that was actually during the Heian era, since the Heian era is actually just a short bit after the Nara period. Specifically, it takes place in the short century just before the Heian era took place. So probably while Tengen was going around preaching the foundations of Jujutsu sorcery and Buddhism as well, I imagine that probably after a short century they were at the absolute height of how famous they were and how many people followed them. So probably during that time the Star Vessel Association was at its absolute peak and very likely had a huge following in Japan. So much so that even after Tengen isn't really that active nowadays, and we even see in the modern day they're not very active at all, they're just curled up in their room, which was actually said that they were like that all throughout history anyway. So it's possible that after the Heian era, after something had actually gone down, that's when Tengen actually decided to be a shine and just lock themselves up inside of the Tomb of the Stars. And it's pretty interesting the lore around the Tomb of the Stars, as I do believe that the city that's actually surrounding the Tomb of the Stars, or just right outside of it, was actually going to be the capital during the time of the Heian era. That's just how important that place was, and Tengen must have been a very big figure for them to actually have just given that entire city, to abandon it all and give it to Tengen, for them to just have as a keepsake. It really just goes to show just how many people followed Tengen as a god, as the true one god at the time of the Heian era. And when you actually think about it like that, it makes sense how even after 1,000 years, there's still these absolute lunatics that are devoutly devoted to just serving Tengen, so much so that they don't even want Tengen to merge with anyone, as they actually see that as a impure thing. Even if it means Tengen could potentially go berserk and destroy the world, they would rather that than Tengen become impure. They want Tengen to stay pure, a true god. But what was Kenjaku's role during the Heian era? What was his relationship to Tengen? And we have some lines between the two that potentially hint at what we'll actually see when we get that Heian era flashback. So the first thing is, after Kenjaku defeated Tengen and Yuki, he says, well, that was a fun warm-up. You have atoned for your tedious existence. Goodbye, friend. And this is actually more important than you'd believe, the fact that he actually used the word friend for Tengen. As we even see in the latest chapter, even though he was kidding when he's talking to Hazanoki, he says that there's a deep criteria if someone actually wants to be his friend. And even though he did say he was joking, I do believe that there was actually some truth into this. There are so many characters where when he's done playing with them, he just finds them boring and he actually treats them like utter garbage, as if they're less than human, or perhaps they're just that much lesser than him. So one example is Noritoshi Kamo. When Kamo came back to the clan and saw Kenjaku had actually taken it over, because Kenjaku had such little interest in Kamo, he was like, oh, you can just run gone free. I'm not even gonna bother to kill you because you're that much of a small fry. Or like when he was talking to Choso, you were just a failed experiment. I really just don't care about you at all. And he was just mocking him then and there. He doesn't even care that he is actually Choso's father. And so on and so forth. There's plenty of examples of him treating a numerable amount of characters like utter human waste, but not with Tengen. He calls Tengen a friend. So that first of all is something very important to point out. Another moment comes from chapter 222 when Kenjaku's actually talking to Akogane and he says, not everyone has the courage to risk their lives, but if someone places them in danger, they have no choice but to act. With no hope for the present or the future, they're willing to die at any time. I despise people who never know the feeling of approaching their ideals step by step. I'm talking to you, Tengen. Clearly Tengen being a shonen has actually hit Kenjaku very deeply, or at very least something happened during the Heian era that deeply hurt Kenjaku to the point that even after 1,000 years, Kenjaku still despises Tengen over whatever this betrayal was or these ideologies that Tengen actually had during that time. So actually I believe that there's many possibilities onto what their relationship actually was. So the one that's actually the least likely to be true, but the one that I personally want to be true, it's just basically my own personal theory that I like. I actually believe that the two were lovers all the way back in the day. We saw that Tengen had a very bleak expression back in the day, so clearly they were probably a lot different to how they were now in the present. I imagine living for 1,000 years definitely changes a person, sometimes for the worse like with Kenjaku, but sometimes for the better, just like with Tengen. And it's possible Tengen actually merging with these star plasma vessels did actually have an effect on his personality, since as we saw his talk with Yuki, those star plasma vessels, they are still alive inside of Tengen right now. So what I personally believe is that those two were actually lovers. I feel like Tengen, who looked down on everyone and no one could actually be their equal since they were literally a god, they were praised as a god, they had countless followers, everyone worshipped them, and they were probably given everything they ever could have wanted. To meet someone like Kenjaku, and I actually do believe that the Heian era version of Kenjaku was a woman, and I think that Kenjaku was originally a woman for a plethora of reasons that I've explained in previous Kenjaku videos and tweets. But the main point of this theory isn't the fact that it'd be really cool if there was a toxic Yuri relationship that was happening during the Heian era, but more so the fact that it probably was taboo that a godlike figure, that a true god, the one and only god all the way back in Heian era, was actually in a relationship with someone, and this relationship may have actually been a secret during the time. I think it's possible that this was actually one of the reasons why Kenjaku was upset at Tengen, that Tengen maybe was too afraid to say that they were in a relationship, since maybe a lot of people would find it too taboo for a god to partake in these things. Because you could fit that context into what Kenjaku is saying, how he despises people who never know the feeling of placing themselves in danger. But I will admit it's pretty unlikely for that theory to be true. I doubt GEGE is going to go the Fujimoto route and even do something like that. What I think is more likely is that Kenjaku may have actually been a follower of Tengen's religion. He actually may have been someone who was deeply infatuated with Tengen, who truly believed Tengen to be a god, and maybe that's actually why they were so close to Tengen. Maybe they were higher up in the original Time Plasma Association religion that was around during the Heian era. It's very likely that it wasn't even called the Time Plasma Association back in the day. That's probably a modern name that currently exists, and it may have just had a completely different name back then. Kenjaku may have been even just an assistant, maybe. They were there to actually help Tengen with whatever wishes they had, or with whatever they would want, since Tengen was a shonen, so someone would need to go in and out and relay messages or get things for them if Tengen ever needed anything. Since we know that Tengen is a scientist who did a lot of experimentations, I'll be talking about this in the Sukuna Yuji part, but it's possible that this is actually where Kenjaku learned a lot of his experimentations and scientific things. And perhaps this is why Kenjaku's actually so upset at Tengen. Maybe in the beginning they were like, oh, Tengen's this all-knowing god that can do no wrong, but after they got to know Tengen, they probably thought, oh, you know, maybe Tengen isn't really this god and Tengen's just a normal person. And it's actually in that way that they actually got to become friends, and maybe Kenjaku is actually the first or perhaps one of the only friends that Tengen actually had during the Heian era, and that's why they actually have such a deep friendship that even after 1,000 years, Kenjaku still considers him a friend. The reason that they fell out was Kenjaku actually wanted to do an experimentation all the way during the Heian era, but Tengen thought it was too reckless or too crazy. If I had to place my money and bet on what it was, I imagine it was actually the merger, and Kenjaku was actually trying to do this all the way back in the Heian era, but of course Tengen didn't want it to happen since it would mean killing a lot of people. So this is probably where they had their falling out, and this is probably why Kenjaku is so upset at Tengen. He's so upset at an actual god because they were someone who was too scared to just take those steps. Alright, now it's actually time to get into the Sukuna and Yuji sections and just some crazy theories pertaining specifically for those two. And if you've been enjoying the video so far, subscribe for more JJK content like this. Alright, so the biggest thing that we have to talk about first is the mummification or the Shimbutsu mummy that Kenjaku had created, and what is it? Just what exactly is this thing? Because we still don't actually know. When we actually see this thing, it looks remarkably similar to Sukuna, so much so that I just truly believe that this is actually a form of Sukuna's body, whether this is a clone or his twin's body, or maybe even his original body, but I do doubt the last part. It's pretty insane how it literally has the exact same facial structure and even skull as Sukuna, and it potentially does actually have 4 arms. Don't unfortunately we can't see because it is wearing I believe a monk's robe, or at least something like that, so you can't see its arms. But its eyes, yeah, that is Sukuna's skull right there. And as for if Kenjaku actually even knew this existed, we don't actually know. Maybe he was actually the one who helped Tengen create this, or maybe it's actually his first time seeing it. But regardless, what he says is, may I take this to Sukuna as a souvenir? And the zombified Tengen's like, yeah, sure, whatever, take it, it's not going to disturb the barrier. And later on, when we see Sukuna is chilling with Uraume, he says, don't worry, I can actually compensate for one digit, implying when he actually eats this Jinbutsu mummy, which we see him do, it will basically count as a finger for some reason. It's really weird. Where this isn't actually made from a Sukuna finger, because as he has this, and as he's talking about how Gojo probably had the last finger somewhere else, right in front of this mummy, he still says that this mummy would give him a equivalent amount of cursed energy to one Sukuna finger. So how can this thing exist? How can there be an extra Sukuna finger? And Sukuna further says, mummification. Did Kenjaku, or rather Tengen, so he does know Tengen, do this ironically? Or, and then of course it cuts off before he actually says what it is, so Sukuna probably just figured it out right at the end. He was about to say the actual truth, and we just don't get to hear it because it cuts right away from Sukuna finishing what he was saying. Damn you, GEGE. I actually believe what's going on is somehow Tengen actually got a piece of DNA of Sukuna. Maybe it was from Sukuna's twin that he originally had, and maybe he discarded the body, though maybe that's not true since a lot of people do believe that Sukuna actually did eat his twin to gain the power, or maybe the DNA really did just come from, let's say, blood from Sukuna that he may have dropped in a battle. So I'm sure when Sukuna was getting jumped by all of the elite sorcerers during the Heian era, even though Sukuna won, at some point someone must have drawn blood at least, like even a drop of blood. There's no doubt that that definitely happened, and somehow Tengen probably sent out one of their religious goons to just collect the blood and bring it back to her to do some experimentation, and through those experimentations they probably created a sort of mummified clone of Sukuna. Maybe this was actually one of the religious followers of Tengen who allowed themselves to be experimented on, and Tengen actually used their body to try and basically ascend them past humanity, just like how Sukuna did, because I'd imagine Tengen would probably be very interested in that, seeing how Sukuna, who was once a human, but he's no longer human, but he's not a curse either. He's this weird mixture of both, where it was said that he was a human in the past and he's been called a curse, but clearly he's an evolved human who's a combination of both, so much so that he's basically a whole new species, neither human or curse. And for a scientist like Kenjaku and Tengen, this probably fascinated them. They would have probably wanted to recreate whatever Sukuna was, and like I said earlier, Tengen having so many just blind religious followers who would do whatever Tengen asked, I'm sure if Tengen's like, yo, I need you to do an experimentation on your body, you're gonna die, will you do this for me? There would probably be a countless number of people lining up allowing Tengen to do experimentations on their bodies. And whoever this poor person was, but I do doubt that it could be Sukuna's body, because it does contain at least 5% of Sukuna's cursed energy, and we know that all of Sukuna's cursed energy, right, all of the souls and everything that has to do with that, was put into the 20 fingers. There shouldn't have been any left into the body. And I do doubt it's his twin, since normally Sukuna's twin should be a conjoined twin, not a separate twin, but it's very likely GEGE might just do a spin on this and maybe change the mythology up just a bit, so it's not a conjoined twin, but just a actual twin. But regardless, I do believe that whatever this mummification is, it's probably one of Tengen's and potentially Kenjaku's experiments as well, when they're just trying to recreate Sukuna, and that would actually explain how Tengen was actually able to also ascend past humanity and not go on a rampage. They were able to do exactly what Sukuna did, and the reason they were able to do what Sukuna did and figured it out is because Tengen had done experimentations on Sukuna's body and figured out the secrets to ascending past humanity. And yes, by the way, it is extremely likely, to the point it may as well be confirmed, that whatever species Sukuna is, right, this evolved human where he's not a human or a curse, Tengen is this exact same thing as well. As Tengen literally says, I've evolved past humanity. I am neither a human nor a curse, which sounds just like Sukuna, and obviously not even getting into the fact that when Kenjaku actually sees this evolved version of Tengen, he just proceeds to laugh, and when Kenjaku asked, why'd you laugh? Kenjaku says, just look at you. Is that what you wanted? You look like, and then of course side by side is Sukuna and Tengen, where it's Kenjaku and GEGE and the story directly telling us they look exactly the same. Now what would Kenjaku's relationship be with the original Yuji? Since it's not confirmed, but it's just my own personal theory that I do believe Yuji was from the Heian era. I've made a whole video going over the fact that Yuji may have existed in the Heian era and his secret past and his royal heritage with Sukuna, and they may have been royal twins. I've made a video on that if you're interested in that. The general theory that I have is that whoever Yuji was, right, whether he was Sukuna's twin or the general that actually killed Sukuna's human body during the Heian era, which was a general called Takefurukuma no Mikoto, who's a very powerful general, I feel like it's possible that maybe Kenjaku actually saw the defeated general, or maybe Yuji really just was Sukuna's twin back in the Heian era and actually gave them a chance just as they were dying to be experimented on by Kenjaku. Or maybe they didn't actually even give their consent for Kenjaku to do this. Kenjaku actually found the corpse of Sukuna's twin or the general and just did experimentations on that body, or maybe on the near-death body, and just turned them into a cursed object. And it's possible that he was holding on to this cursed object, and when he actually found Kairi Itadori's body, he decided, okay, it's time I actually go with this plan right now, and when he actually got pregnant via Jin and Todori, while Kenjaku was pregnant with Yuji in Kaori's body, he may have actually mixed the embryo and fused it with the cursed object. So it wasn't like a normal incarnation that we see most of the sorcerers have, so all the Culling Game players, Choso, Sukuna, they just incarnate into who they are. Maybe Kenjaku actually did it in such a specifically unique way where he put it into a new life that rather than incarnating, it actually fused, and the soul and cursed energy and all the powers of the cursed object actually fused into the embryo, creating a brand new life altogether. So that's why Yuji is just so physically strong, right? It's because whoever this person was back in the day may have also been so powerful, because it makes no sense how Yuji is so unbelievably powerful even without cursed energy and without any heavenly restrictions either. And it would also explain why Yuji got that power up, where even Sukuna is saying, oh, Yuji's from that time and Kenjaku does the grossest things. It's probably to do with Kenjaku fusing the cursed object or whatever Yuji was, while Kenjaku himself was pregnant with the baby. And he may have specifically chosen to do this with Jin specifically because of the bloodline that Jin and Grandpa Itadori have. All of them look remarkably similar to Sukuna. And we know that GEGE has actually said in an interview that Sukuna had no wife or children, but it's possible that Yuji's bloodline comes from maybe Sukuna's twin, so maybe he had a family and passed it down, or maybe Sukuna's cousin or his uncle or his father. But that's all from me. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like. It helps out a ton. Thank you very much. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content just like this. Because like I said in the beginning of the video, over 90% of people who actually watch my videos aren't subscribed. So if you want to see a ton of crazy theories, JJK spoiler videos, power scaling analysis, be sure to subscribe. If you're a JJK fan, trust me, you won't regret it. And of course, thank you to all the channel members as well. It is much appreciated. Thank you guys very much. That's all from me. Take care and have a nice day.